There are two lies that the devil loves for people to believe: that they have no self-worth and that there is no hell. If you believe that your soul is worth nothing, then you won't take care of it, and if you don't take care of your soul, you could find yourself heading to hell. The good news is that God doesn't want you to go there and puts many graces in your life to keep you from going to hell. Because God does not interfere with free will, the choice to use these graces or not is up to us. However, as we will see in this story, the choices we make will lead us ultimately to God or to hell. This story is of a young woman in Munich who, after dying in 1937, appeared to a friend from her lifetime, who is now a nun and was praying for the repose of the soul of her friend. The young woman told her friend to stop praying for her because she was in hell. From there, she gave an account of her life and her repeated rejections of the invitation of grace. She said, "On the drive home, my husband was suddenly blinded by a car coming from the opposite direction. After a scream of fear, I experienced a crushing pain, although in comparison with the present pain, it was but a trifle. The morning before my death, a thought crossed my mind to go to Mass. It sounded imploring. Clearly and resolutely, my no cut this thread of thinking. And now I was floating above my body. I was flooded by a glaring light, and suddenly I saw the scene of my life. As in a mirror, my soul showed itself to me. The graces trampled underfoot since my childhood, until the last no against God. Repent? Never. Be ashamed? Never. But any less could I endure it being under the eyes of the God I had rejected. So only one thing was left: to flee. That was the particular judgment. The invisible judge spoke, "Be gone." Another story comes from a priest who wrote a book titled Hell back in 1876 about his grandfather, Rostopchin, who was friends with a count named Count Orloff and their mutual friend, General V. One evening, after dinner and drinks, Count Orloff and General V had engaged in a conversation about religion, although their conversation about it was more ridicule than anything else. They came upon the subject of hell and agreed that whoever should die first would come back and tell the other of it. It just so happened that a war had broken out and General V was killed in it. However, no one knew of this yet. One day, as Rostopchin was getting dressed, Count Orloff suddenly burst in looking deathly pale and frightened. He told Rostopchin that he had just seen General V. "Oh, so he's back from the war then?" Count Orloff said, "No, he has not come back, and that is what frightens me." He explained to Rostopchin of the pact that he had made with General V a few weeks back. Then he explained, "This morning I was lying in bed just waking up, when suddenly the bed curtains open, and I see just 2 feet from me General V standing upright and pale. He had his right arm on his chest, and he said, 'There is a hell, and I am there.' And then he disappeared." About 10 days later, they received the news from an army messenger of the death of General V, who had died that very same day and hour that he had appeared to Count Orloff to announce to him that there was a hell. You can take these stories to heart, or you can reject them. At any rate, they serve as a way of education. Maybe they will help you think a little deeper of realities that you had never thought of before. Maybe they will strengthen your faith in the supernatural, and they can serve as a warning, because they dramatically emphasize the consequences of man's moral choice for all eternity. Just like all the souls in these stories who made their choices of what they chose to believe, so the choice is also up to you. Is there a hell? Christians believe there is, but the devil would love nothing more than for you to believe that it doesn't exist. Saint Germaine Cousin was a poor and simple shepherd girl who nobody wanted. Detested by her stepmother and ignored by her father, she was cast out of the house to live under the steps in the barn. Born in 1579, the family was very poor. Germaine herself was born with a paralyzed and disfigured hand, making her even more distasteful to her stepmother. On top of this, Germaine developed scrofula, which today we know as tuberculosis of the lymph nodes. A consequence of this infection, Germaine developed abscesses on her neck. It was because of this scrofula, which was untreatable at the time, that Germaine was cast out of the family. She was banished to the barn to live a lonely life and serve as the family's shepherdess, even though she was only a mere little girl at 5 years old. The sheep were her only friends. On top of her duty as shepherdess, Germaine also was required to spin wool every day, and if she didn't meet her daily quota, she was badly beaten by her stepmother. Although Germaine never went to school, she did get to listen to the lessons for the children every day after Mass. This was how she learned her catechism and how she learned to put her faith into practice. As her love for God grew, she added God to her list of friends, along with the sheep. She went to Mass and said the rosary daily, making a rosary out of a piece of string. One day, when she greatly desired to go to a weekday Mass, Germaine stuck her wooden spindle into the ground, asked her sheep to stay put, and made the sign of the cross. When she returned from Mass, the sheep had remained where she left them. She continued the practice of leaving her sheep in the care of divine providence in order to attend Mass each day, and no harm ever came to them. This prompted curiosity from the villagers, since a nearby forest was well known to be populated by wolves. Germaine had an extraordinary love for God, and he had an extraordinary love for her. His pleasure in her often showed in the miracles he granted through her. One day, as she was on her way to Mass, she came upon a river that was too high to cross. Undaunted, Germaine proceeded to the river, and as she set her foot in the raging stream, the waters separated, allowing her to cross, just as the waters of the Jordan had opened for the Ark of the Covenant to pass. After she reached the other side, the waters returned to their tumultuous course. The peasants watched this with awe and fear, and then reported the miracle to the whole village. Germaine was only allowed to eat scraps of bread that her family gave her after their meals. She would wait by the back door and politely take the scraps of food. Germaine was always gracious and kind to her father and stepmother, regardless of how they treated her. The children and townspeople as well ridiculed Germaine, taunted her, and teased her. We know she must have attained a very high degree in holiness, not so much in the miracles that God granted through her, but in the loving way she treated others. She didn't let her outward experiences bitter her soul. One day, as she shared her few scraps of bread with the poor, her stepmother caught her and accused her of thievery. After abusing her both verbally and physically, she ordered Germaine to open her apron to show her the scraps of bread. Obediently, Germaine did as she was told, and in so doing, instead of scraps of bread, beautiful flowers in full bloom fell to the ground. This was in the middle of winter, when nothing was growing. Seeing this miracle and proof of God's protection on Germaine, her stepmother softened towards Germaine somewhat. Germaine was even invited to stay in the house again if she wanted, but Germaine politely declined, preferring instead to live like Jesus. One night, 2 traveling monks saw a heavenly vision of a small group of young virgins singing praises to God. Then they saw another virgin join the group, coming from the direction of the city Germaine lived in. It was this night that Germaine died in her sleep. Germaine was only 22 years old. Her body was discovered by her father the next day, where she lay on her bed of hay, holding her string rosary in her hands. 40 years after her death, the body of Germaine was found to be incorrupt after a farmer accidentally cut into her body with a pickaxe when digging a new grave for a fellow parishioner. Her body was so incorrupt that it looked more alive than dead, and her forehead even bore the red mark where the pickaxe hit. Germaine, who had been buried without anyone knowing her story, now was being hailed a saint through this miracle. It was here that information about the poor shepherdess was gathered, books were written about her life, and the world began to learn about Germaine. Many miracles began to happen through her intercession. Her cause was open for beatification, but unfortunately, the French Revolution and many other things interrupted the process. Her cause was introduced in 1850 when 30 bishops requested it. She was canonized in 1867 and given June 15th as her feast day. She is the patroness of orphans, disabled people, and victims of abuse. Germaine's life could have been spent in self-pity. However, she used her sufferings to grow close to God, and God made sure to lift her up high for all the world to see. Saint Germaine Cousin, pray for us. Let me add something also important. The souls in purgatory can no longer do anything for themselves. They are totally helpless. If the living do not pray for them, they are totally abandoned. Therefore, it is very important to realize the immense power, the incredible power that each one of us has in his hands to relieve these souls who suffer. A soul in purgatory sees very clearly on the day of his funeral if we really pray for him, or if we have simply made an active presence to show we are there. The poor souls also say that tears are no good to them, only prayer. Often they complain that people go to a funeral without addressing a single prayer to God while shedding many tears. This is useless. Another very effective means, Maria tells us, is the Stations of the Cross, because by contemplating the sufferings of the Lord, we begin little by little to hate sin and to desire salvation for all people. This inclination of the heart brings great relief to the souls in purgatory. One day I was on a train, and in my compartment there is a man who didn't stop speaking evil of the church, of priests, and even of God. I said to him, "Listen, you don't have the right to say all that. It is not good." He was furious with me. Afterwards, I arrived at my station. I got off the train and I said to God, "Lord, do not let this soul be lost." Years later, the soul of this man came to visit me. He told me that he had come very close to hell, but he was saved simply by this prayer I had said at that moment. It is great to see that just one thought, one impulse of the heart, a simple prayer for someone, can prevent them from falling into hell. It is pride which leads to hell. Hell is to say no to God with stubbornness. Our prayers can inspire an act of humility in the dying, a single instant of humility, however small, and this can help them to avoid hell. Here I would like to give you the testimony of Herman Cohen. He left the world to enter a very austere religious order, and he frequently adored the Blessed Sacrament, for which he had a great veneration. During his adoration, he would beg the Lord to convert his mother, whom he loved so much. Well, his mother died without having been converted. So Herman, sick with sorrow, prostrated himself before the Blessed Sacrament, and in deep grief he prayed, "Lord, I owe you everything, it is true, but what have I refused you? My youth, my hopes in the world, my well-being, the joys of a family, a rest? I sacrificed all as soon as you called me, and you, Lord, eternal goodness, who promised to give back 100-fold, you have refused me the soul of my mother. My God, I succumb to this martyrdom, I will stop my complaints." He cried his poor heart out. Suddenly a mysterious voice struck his ear. "Man of little faith, your mother is saved. Know that prayer is powerful in my presence. I gathered all those you have addressed to me for your mother, and my providence took account of her in her last hour. At the moment she expired, I came near to her. She saw me and cried, 'My Lord and my God.' Have courage, your mother has avoided damnation, and fervent supplication will soon deliver her soul from the bonds of purgatory." We know that Father Herman Cohen soon afterwards learned through a second apparition that his mother had risen to heaven. I knew a young man of about 20 in a nearby village. This young man's village had been cruelly stricken by a series of avalanches which had killed a large number of people. One night, this young man was at his parents' house when he heard an avalanche just next door to his house. He heard piercing screams, heart-rending screams, "Save us, come save us." Leaping up, he rose from his bed and rushed downstairs to go to the rescue of these people. His mother had heard the screams and prevented him from leaving. She blocked the doors, saying, "No, let others go and help them, not always us. It's too dangerous outside. I don't want yet another death." But because he had been deeply affected by these screams, he really wanted to go to the rescue of these people. He pushed his mother aside and said to her, "Yes, I am going. I can't let them die like this." He went out, and then he himself on the path was struck by an avalanche and was killed. 3 days after his death, he comes to visit me at night, and he says to me, "Have 3 masses said for me. Through this I will be delivered from purgatory." I went to inform his family and friends. They were astonished to know that only after 3 masses he would be delivered from purgatory. His friends said to me, "Oh, I would not have liked to be in his place in the moment of death, if you had seen all the bad things he had done." But this young man said to me, "You see, I have made an act of pure love in risking my life for these people. It is thanks to this that the Lord welcomed me so quickly into his heaven. Yes, charity covers a multitude of sins." The story of this young man shows us that charity, a single act of love given freely, had been sufficient to purify this young man from a sinful life, and the Lord had made the most of this moment of love. Maria added to that story that this young man may never again have had that opportunity to offer such a great act of love, and that he might have turned bad. The Lord in his mercy took him just at the moment when he appeared before him at his most beautiful, most pure, because of this act of love. It is very important at the hour of death to abandon ourselves to God's will. Maria told me of the case of a mother of 4 children who was about to die. Instead of rebelling and worrying, she said to the Lord, "I accept death as long as it is your will, and I put my life in your hands. I entrust my sons to you, and I know that you will take care of them." Maria said that because of her immense trust in God, this woman went straight to heaven and avoided purgatory. Therefore, we really can say that love, humility, and abandonment to God are the 3 golden keys to going directly to heaven. He told them this, "My children, a good priest had the unhappiness to lose a friend he cherished greatly, and so he prayed very much for the repose of his soul. One day, God made known to him that his friend was in purgatory, and he suffered greatly. The holy priest believed that he could do no better than to offer the holy sacrifice of the Mass for his dear friend who had died. At the moment of the consecration, he took the host between his fingers and said, 'Holy Eternal Father, let us make an exchange. You hold the soul of my friend who is in purgatory, and I hold the body of your son in my hands. Well, good and merciful Father, deliver my friend, and I offer your son with all the merits of his death and passion.' The request was answered. In fact, at that moment of the elevation, he saw the soul of his friend shining in glory, rising to heaven. God had accepted the deal. There is no value in complaining about the times we live in. Parents do not help their children by responding to all their desires, by giving them everything that they want simply to keep them happy, so they don't have to listen to them yelling. Pride can take root in this way in the heart of the child. Teach children how to make sacrifices. Why does religious indifference exist today? Because children have not learned how to renounce their whims. They later on become misfits and people with no judgment who get into all sorts of things and want to possess everything in abundance. This child who has not learned from its infancy to control himself becomes selfish, hard-hearted, and even tyrannical. This is why today there is so much hatred and a lack of charity. Do we want to live in a better time? Let us start by educating the children.